Shalom, and welcome to a message for the Parsha for Parshat Acharei and Kedoshim. Yes, this week we have two Parshiot. The first Parsha speaks primarily about Yom Kippur and the holy service in the Holy Temple. And in the second half of that Parsha, that is the first Parsha of this week, the discussion is about all the forbidden relationships. And then the second Parsha is Kedoshim, which means Kedoshim Tihiyu, holy you shall be, and it speaks about so many mitzvot, which are fundamental to Judaism, and us being holy. Holy means separate, means different than everyone else. And in this Parsha, in fact, there are 70 mitzvot, 70 various commandments, the do's and the don'ts of a Jew. Very fundamental to who we are. I want to focus in on the first part of the first Parsha, which speaks about Yom Kippur. What is Yom Kippur? Of course, it's the holiest day of the year. And on Yom Kippur calls for the holiest human alive, namely the high priest, meaning amongst the priests, he is the holiest of all of them, to do all of the service. And then it calls for the entry into the Holy of Holies, the holiest spot in this universe, the place where the holiest point of the Shekhinah, of God's presence, rests. And that is in the Bet HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, in the Holy of Holies. And what does he do in there? He does the holiest service of all, namely the offering of the Ktoret, the incense. In fact, the Medrash tells us that the offering of the incense, as we know, took place every day. But every day it took place in the regular part of the Holy Temple, so to speak. In the holy, not in the Holy of Holies, not in the chamber in which it says clearly in this week's Parsha that no one shall ever enter there except for on this day and except for to offer this special offering. The Medrash tells us that the Ktoret is the highlight of all offerings, of all service to Hashem. In fact, Hashem says, I, quote, enjoy this more than anything else. In other words, this gives me pleasure. Now I want you to think about it for a moment. What really is so special about the Ketores? Is it that Hashem needs a special smell, a special aroma? You think without that, if he wished, somehow he was limited to smelling through nostrils? God forbid, that's not the case. And he needed that special pleasure of a good aroma. Do you think that he needs to wait for us to bring it to him? What is it about the Ktoret? What is it about the physical, actual Ktoret, the incense? And of course, moreover, what it represents and what it represents in our lives. And the answer is, the Torah actually spells out the 11 various herbs, spices, that went into the mix, to the recipe of the makeup of the Ktoret, of the incense. One is so distinct and it stands out because it actually comes, it's a product, it's the blood of a non-kosher animal, a non-kosher root worm. That is perplexing. Throughout the entire book of Vayikra, Leviticus, in which we are now, we constantly read about and we're taught about the varying offerings to Hashem. And there's one common denominator, that each one has to be perfectly kosher. Not only does it have to be perfect, but it has to be kosher. You can only bring an offering to Hashem from a kosher animal. If you were to find the most exotic and beautiful animal, but it's not kosher, and you try to offer it to Hashem, not only you didn't do a great mitzvah, not only you didn't do a mitzvah at all, but in fact you committed a terrible sin. And here Hashem tells us, take these ingredients, some of which are distinctly from a non-kosher source. They come from a non-kosher place. What is this? What is the idea behind this? The idea is that, of course, if done in the right way, this teaches us that taking something which in itself inherently is not good and directing it, redirecting it to good, taking it and transforming it. bringing it to a place where it becomes good, taking something which originates in a non-kosher animal, and in this case, as it's warranted by the Torah, elevating to a point where not only it becomes kosher, it becomes, so to speak, okay, but in fact it becomes the greatest of service to Hashem. This is the reason why it's the greatest of service to Hashem, and why Hashem derives so much pleasure, so to speak, from it, because this is taking something similar to what he does, which is creating something from nothing. In this case, creating good from bad. And that is the lesson for us. That is the message for us. Each and every one of us has some points in our life, in our character, in our makeup as a person, that are perhaps not good, or sometimes even worse than just not good. We have character flaws. We have some traits about us that are really bad or terrible. And of course, when you look at it just purely from a human perspective, it seems like, well, what can I do? This is my weakness. Or worse, I'm totally lost. We fall into some kind of despair. And what Hashem is teaching us, what this is teaching us, that the holiest day of the year, you did the holiest service in the holiest place, and it reaches the holiest spot, so to speak. It hits that spot where Hashem says, I have this special pleasure from it, is when you take that and you harness it and you use it for good. Each and every one of us is created, is born with some character flaws, as the Rambam Maimonides explains. But the point of it is, the objective is not that we remain with those flaws, and God forbid, not that we feed into those flaws even worse, but rather that we harness them and we take them and utilize them for good. Okay? Think of that famous movie Catch Me If You Can, where somebody has the ability to connive, and he uses it now to help law enforcement, to help the people from not being scammed, from not being cheated. That's just a small, tiny example. There are so many more. Use it. And most importantly, when you use it, you're going to bring great pleasure to Hashem. You're going to be creating good from bad, something from nothing. Have a Shabbat Shalom.